Here.
Councilmember Smith.
Here.
Mayor Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Danuski.
Here.
Councilmember Curtis.
Present.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness.
Here.
Councilmember Sperry.
Who? No, which one is
We have
that?
another mic. That's mine.
Is that you? Again?
You don't want to listen to me anyway.
No.
It's funny because I almost had this fear of touching my mic to see if I had the one,
No, we found him. We caught the culprit.
We say that.
Mark it and throw it away.
All right.
Oh, that's actually a really good point.
If you will please stand and join the fire commissioner, the chair, in the flag salute.
Indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Okay.
Next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. If there are no modifications, the agenda will stand approved as written. Next item on the agenda is citizen comments. This is an opportunity for you to express your views on issues that are important to you and to the community. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes if possible. And there is an explanation and some procedures. Things have changed a little bit on that back table. If the clerk would please call the first person.
Todd Prince.
Do I need to state my name and address? Is that how it goes?
City is good enough now.
Okay. Todd Prince from Kenmore. Thank you for your time today. I unfortunately feel it necessary to address the council to defend my character relating to recent emails I received regarding abandoned vehicles from Chief Souther. I recently received an email from Chief Souther stating that over 90% of the reports I had submitted were unfounded and he would no longer respond to any future reports. First, the inference that I would intentionally submit false or misrepresentative reports I take very seriously. Second, I have not questioned street parking for its intended purpose, but rather when it's used, for lack of a better term, long-term vehicle storage or long-term parking. Third, I have not wanted to continue to report vehicles observed without moving, but it was the Chief's preference regarding these types of vehicles to rely on citizens reporting such observations. Fourth, I understand street parking is not a high priority, and I don't think I've ever suggested that it was. Fifth, it seems hypocritical to ask citizens or anyone to do something and then admonish them or try to reprimand them for doing that work in good faith. Personally, I feel I took appropriate steps to be as accurate as possible before making a report, including documenting and at times taking photographs of the vehicles to verify that they had not moved before making a report. The only response I received regarding the data of this activity was from Chief Urquhart's office on a records request. In reviewing that data, I could not find anything that supported the Chief's assertions, but rather that the reports I have made are reasonable and accurate. In summary, I found that 6.5 days was the average a vehicle was observed without moving prior to being reported. 87% of the vehicles reported were still there when the officer responded. This likely would have been 97%, except in one case there was a 14-day period between when the officer responded. 3 vehicles reported multiple times accounted for 55% of the cases, and there were the basis of 82% of the cases being reported. That's 3 vehicles really at the basis of most of the reporting.
Mr. Prince, you have 30 seconds.
Okay. The fact that the vehicle is moved after being reported and taken by an officer is not a fair assessment on the validity of what is being reported, but only that the owner see the notice to move the vehicle and do so. Now, despite my report a couple of weeks ago of vehicles that had not moved in over a month, they continue to remain without any action. Whatever the reason for not doing something about these vehicles, I can't answer, but you can't say that you don't know that they are there or what's going on.
Mayor, we're at 3 minutes.
Further, it is unfair to try and use me as an excuse or present that I'm reporting false information as a reason not to take action. You can choose to close your eyes, put your head down and pretend something isn't there, but it doesn't mean the issue is going to go away. It's kind of like the broken window theory. Fixing the first one helps prevent others. Doing nothing becomes more expensive and less efficient. Finally, I just want to note that while statistics on vehicle prowls in the area continues to remain low, which is great, when you are the victim of somebody trying to break into your vehicle, you take it very seriously regardless of the statistics and become more vigilant about that activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Prince.
Wendy Reynolds.
I really hate this. Okay. My name is Wendy Reynolds. I live on 84th Avenue Northeast. I've lived in Kenmore for 15 years. This is my first city council meeting. I'm here tonight to talk about the planters that were placed on the end of my street at Simons Road in an effort to calm traffic. I attended our neighborhood group traffic meetings, so I was aware that they were going to tighten up this turn. However, the turns are so tight, they have become a bigger danger. My son's bus driver reports that she can no longer pull off Simons to pick up the kids, so she is now blocking traffic on Simons Road. People are honking at her every day. She also reports that she can't make the turn onto 84th Avenue Northeast if a car is waiting at the stop sign, which is the norm during her daily routes. Other drivers are reporting the same thing. The waste management driver told me he couldn't turn onto our street if a car was waiting there. A friend who was a firefighter made the turn in his car and told me there's no way he could make that turn in his fire truck. This alone should be enough to have those planters moved today. The turns are so tight that cars are having to slow to 5 miles per hour and go into the bike lane to make the turn in order to not be rear-ended. The tight turns are also creating a backup of cars trying to turn out onto Simons Road. People are reporting that these backups are making it so they can't turn into their driveways, a first for some people who've lived here for 40 years. And this is before the 14 houses that are being built on our tiny stretch of road are occupied. At the traffic meetings, we were under the impression that they were putting curbing in as shown in the handout. The planters were not mentioned as an option. The curbing presented is a much more attractive option than boxes filled with rocks. While I do find the planters to be visually unappealing, my primary concern is that the turn has been made too tight and safety has been greatly compromised. This is not a matter of people just getting used to it. 84th Avenue and Simons Road was already a very tough intersection. These planters have made it much, much worse. Please listen to the people that have to drive this intersection multiple times a day. Please listen to the professional drivers who have repeatedly stated that these turns are too tight.
Ms. Reynolds, you have 30
Please
seconds.
get these removed as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Reynolds.
John Adamski.
Hi, thanks for the opportunity to speak. My name is John Adamski. I'm a long-term Kenmore resident. I have 3 little things that I want to talk to you about tonight. One of them, the first one, has to do with your agenda item regarding water quality sampling at Logboom Park. This is water quality sampling for toxic algae and also for fecal content. Last year, this appropriation included sampling that was accomplished on other parts of the lake, primarily by me, at Arrowhead Point and sometimes out in the middle of the lake. The language does not specifically say that the samples from other places than Logboom Park would be covered by this allocation. They were last year, and I would hope that they would be again this year, and I would appreciate clarification on that. My second comment has to do with the water taxi. Kenmore has been encouraging King County, and King County is enthusiastic about water taxi. I think it'd be a great idea too, by the way, but I want to make sure that we realize that the water taxis, when they have been employed in other places, most notably in Bremerton, have had problems with the wake of the boat causing a shore erosion. And the state of Washington has had to kind of rebuy the ferries for that route in order to get a low wake ferry for that. And it was quite expensive. It's just now going into service there. These ferries go very, very fast, like 35 miles an hour or so, which is pretty darn fast for a big boat going up and down Lake Washington. And I'm concerned that we might have wake problems or other interference problems with small boats and paddle boards and swimmers. So I want to make I'd recommend that perhaps we can do a test of the boat that they might want to use here and see if it works, see if there are any issues, or maybe we can have a hearing with the folks who want to do this, and they can explain in great detail to us who live along the water to make sure that we can do this safely. My third comment has to do with the...
You have 30 seconds.
With the King County initiatives, and this one suggests that toxic algae, which is a frequent problem in North Lake Washington, needs to be addressed by King County together with us. I strongly applaud that effort, and I volunteer to help in any way I can.
Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Adamski. We appreciate your concern for the lake and what's happening there.
Yeah.
Bub Black.
Hello, my name is Bob Black. I'm in Kenmore. And just to let you know, I am still around. I know there was some concern about that earlier on. I'd like to talk about something that Wendy had already commented on, and that's the traffic revision that has transpired on 84th. Secondary concern that I have is also the traffic revision that has been placed on 75th. The traffic revision on 84th is, in fact, a hazardous situation by anyone's stretch of the means. Large vehicles such as fire trucks, emergency vehicles, cannot navigate that intersection. This slows down response, and seconds in a medical emergency, as several of you know, is everything. That's a big problem. There was a plan put in place some time ago, and this was before Kenmore was Kenmore. It was put in place by King County, and then Kenmore became Kenmore. And it appeared that they were going to follow through with that. And that had to do with placing some traffic lights, one on 92nd and Simons, one on 84th and Simons. I have the information here, just in case you need it. I will leave it with the clerk over here. Secondly, they are ugly. They are hazardous. They're just, to use my wife's terms, obscene. They look like small coffins. Putting that all aside, the turns are too tight. Large vehicles can't navigate them. That's basically the issue. I live 1,000 feet from that intersection. I drive it 3 times a day. I know what I'm talking about. On 75th, to transgress to a different location, where they put in a chicane, it's not really a chicane. Basically, it just moves everybody into the center prior to a blind hill. I don't think I would want to be going over that in the center of the road, because somebody coming the other direction can't see me, I can't see them. You can kind of figure out what's going to happen. It's going to be head-on. Plus, they are so ridiculously placed, they do not even meet the criteria of a true chicane. You can look that information up. I really have very little else to say other than the fact that...
30 seconds.
Thank you. The people that live in the area are very unhappy. I did meet with an individual, and we discussed the intersection. One thing that I found disappointing, and I have always found disappointing about the city of Kenmore, is the comment that once we do something, we don't revisit it. We need to revisit a lot of things constantly.
Mayor, we're at 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm actually done, so we're good.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Black.
Eric Admin.
Hi there. Eric Admin, 7815 Northeast 192nd Street. And please refer to a handout that I had the clerk pass out ahead. I'm also president of a local nonprofit organization, Snow King Watershed Council, dedicated to protecting and restoring our local streams and watersheds. This past weekend, we had a very successful event, the Swamp Creek Watershed Forum, in partnership with the city of Kenmore, right here in Kenmore City Hall. We had this room full of about 60 people. The event brought together people interested in the creek, highlighted the history and values of Swamp Creek, and shared ways they can contribute to the health of the creek. I want to thank Chris Overlease and Richard Sawyer for their help, and David Baker for attending. On one side of your handout is information on our volunteer water quality monitoring program, Snow King Water Watchers. For almost 2 years now, we've been monitoring 26 sites on 19 streams in multiple jurisdictions. Our goals include identifying and training people who want to be stewards of local streams, collecting water quality data, providing a regular extra set of eyes on streams since officials can't always be there, sharing information on stream health with other citizens and elected officials, and advocating for ways to protect our local streams. On the other side of your handout, if you flip it over, is a stream report card for Little Swamp Creek. Let me bring your attention to a few items. Little Swamp Creek starts up by Country Village in Bothell and flows into Kenmore. On a number of levels, we find that Little Swamp Creek usually is healthy for fish and other wildlife. So, for instance, adequate dissolved oxygen and cold temperature are necessary for salmonids. Those are normally okay, except during periods of high temperature. Fecal coliform is a concern for human contact, and almost 50% of the time it strays into levels that are either not advisable or unsafe for human contact. Stream bugs, also known in the biz as benthic macroinvertebrates, are a long-term indicator of stream pollution due to their varying pollution tolerances, and those were in pretty good shape in Little Swamp Creek. Something we really can't quantify since we go out and monitor monthly is the number of high stormwater events, but they have a huge impact, and I recently emailed you on this. You can see some representative photos on the report card. If you look at the leftmost picture, that's kind of the normal stream running clear. The rightmost is some example of some mud running off of a construction site, and then the rightmost picture is an example of what the creek looks like after that mud has made its way downstream. The effect of this is that it damages habitat, and it also causes property damage to private parties and to the city, such as to the road itself, like when it recently overtook top Northeast 192nd Street. Factors at work include housing projects clear-cutting large lots which drain to the creek. There's at least 14 underway in Little Swamp Creek drainage right now. Grading contractors who permit mud and silt to run off their sites, and older construction that lacks stormwater controls. Report card leaves you with some key findings and requested actions, and I'll be back with report cards for some other local streams and some of our other water monitors, and I'll be at one of your upcoming meetings on your agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Admin.
John Hendrickson.
Good evening, John Hendrickson, Kenmore, Washington. One thing I would point out to the council, I think it would be much more respectful to the speakers here if you guys would go back to putting a clock up instead of interrupting every person with a 30-second warning. I like the 30-second warning, but it's uncomfortable for people to come up here. It's been over a year. Doesn't seem like a good faith effort on the part of the council to help facilitate public comment. I have two issues I'd like to discuss with you this evening. First is the plan for the bridge going over the slough. It's 2 lanes. I'd like to point out that when we incorporated in '98, we got a plan from King County. In that plan, they told us that King County at that time was planning on putting a 3rd lane on the bridge. Now, why is that a good idea? Well, one, quality of life for people who live on the south side. people on Simons won't have to wait. More traffic coming down the road is what we need for our economy, especially to help Lake Point. King County saw that. Let me read on page 133 of the plan. It said there are 2 transportation projects in the county's 6-year CIP are projected to secure funding in the near future from 1999 to 2001. But because their anticipated funding years are beyond the projected 1998 incorporation by Kenmore, these projects would become the physical responsibility of the city. Were Kenmore not to incorporate, it is anticipated that the projects above would be built, adding a lane on the bridge. I know I had mentioned it when I was on the council for years, and why isn't it being done now? You know, maybe you could put a 3rd lane on the other side of the older bridge, expand the foundation, and that older bridge that we're keeping could last much, much longer. So I would encourage you to put that into your design, get the money for that now. Trump's talking about the funding that he wants to put out. Federal Highway Administration is supposed to pay for bridges anyway, not us. We should do that. Again, quality of life for those people, economic development, especially Lake Point. The other issue I wanted to talk about, I've asked you several times about this letter that I questioned that came from Little League, Brent Smith and his group, where they encouraged the council to basically use coercion against state parks and withhold zoning for the seminary building unless they give you the ball fields. If you look at the Dolan versus Tigard case, it's a landmark federal Supreme Court case regarding the practice of zoning and property rights, and serves to establish limits on the ability of cities and other government agencies to use zoning and land use regulations to compel property owners to make unrelated public improvements.
30 seconds.
Right? So you can't compel them to give you the ball field. They're the property owners, they own the park, and you're compelling them in what you said here in this letter. Package up the ball field renovation, upgrade, and drainage improvements components in any zoning and development agreement you put together for St. Ed's. Quote, take advantage of this opportunity to integrate the ball fields into any development and zoning agreement for state parks.
We're at 3 minutes, Mayor.
Sounds illegal to me. I haven't heard back from any of you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Hendrickson. City Manager, can you address Mr. Prince?
No, I can't.
Okay, can we, I guess the chief has already addressed him, and that's it?
You know, so we contract with the Sheriff's Department. How our chief of police determines how to use his resources based on priorities and histories is, I really trust his judgment, and he consults with his superiors who are at the King County Sheriff's Office, and so if he wants to take it up with his superiors, he can.
Wendy Reynolds and Mr. Black had commented on the planners. Could you comment on those, please?
Sure, yeah. We received some really helpful feedback over the last week, quite a bit of feedback, more than we predicted. So, as you all know, a lot of this work is a result of our traffic engineers' direct work with the neighborhoods. He worked with 12 different neighborhoods on the neighborhood transportation traffic calming plan. There was a limited budget for that. I think citywide there was about $250,000. A lot of that went to things like signage and paint and other things like that. There certainly wasn't money in the budget to do $1 million improvements at intersections or anything like that. Regarding 84th and Simons, we did hear complaints from citizens talking about the speeds of cars going around those corners and the distance that pedestrians have to travel across that wide intersection. So that was the main purpose of the improvements that went in there, was to shorten up that distance that pedestrians have to travel and also reduce that turning speed of cars going on from Simons onto 84th. The turning radius was installed per engineering standards, and it was, according to those standards, they are supposed to accommodate school buses and fire trucks and things like that. That said, even though the radius was designed to handle those, I did talk to our public works director and our engineer, and we are going to pull those planters back, or some of those planters back. And we're going to do that soon. That's going to be something we're going to do pretty quickly. But as far as the look of the planters and the issues with the chicanes and everything, what I recommend is coming back to you at a council meeting in the near future to talk about options and what you'd like to do, if anything, at those locations. And also, more is coming. We have traffic circles planned, again, as a result of what citizens were asking for in the neighborhood traffic calming meetings that we had. We have residential traffic circles planned for, I guess, the northwest part of the city. We will be modifying the curve at that Arrowhead Drive turn, making it a little tighter and therefore creating some more room for pedestrians. So more changes are coming, and again, these are a result of not things we dreamed up in a vacuum, but things that citizens have been asking for. I think one thing about the transportation traffic calming program that we went through is, even though we blanketed the neighborhoods with notices and things, we had very little participation. And so a lot of it was a self-selected group that came, and pretty low turnout at the neighborhoods. If you add all the neighborhoods together and put them in a room, it would be big turnout. But per neighborhood, it was small turnout, anywhere from 3 to 6 to 10 people coming to those meetings. And they were self-selected, and we were trying to be responsive to them. One thing that happened in the McDonald Highlands neighborhood is we were planning to make some changes that the citizens that attended asked for. And when other citizens who hadn't attended found out we were going to make those changes, they protested. And so what we did in McDonald Highlands is we put it to a vote of that neighborhood, and we went with what the majority said. We could do something similar with the chicanes for 75th. We could say, do you want them in or out? If you want them in, we have some options on how they could look. So we could put it to a vote of the neighborhood, or at least the people that live on that street. So those are some things we'd like to talk to you about at an upcoming council meeting. Also, I'd like to get some feedback on what ugly is. I'm hearing the planners are pretty ugly, but for different reasons. And I guess the good news about the improvements we put in is they were temporary in nature. They're adjustable or removable. So we can certainly put in something more attractive, but I guess I'm not the right person to define attractive, so we're going to have to talk about what attractive is. So.
And I think also we can't lose sight of the fact that this is in response to a couple of young people losing their lives, crossing streets and whatever. And so that was something that we asked to be done. So, all right, let's see here. Mr. Admin, thank you very much for this. Thank you for the event that you held on Saturday. And just to keep you posted, we are putting in telemetry monitoring equipment on Swamp Creek. I believe it's by the bridge there by the end, and you will be able to access that 24 hours a day from your computer. And I don't know exactly what all is going to be monitored, but my understanding is going to be pH, flow rate, oxygen content, and perhaps turbidity, but there may be others there. But anyway, it's in the budget, it's been in the budget, and it will be happening. So Anyway, thank you very much for that. Mr. Hendrickson, thank you very much for your comments. We are working on the bridge, and we certainly will continue to look at what can be done to improve traffic flow there. Mr. Adamski, thank you very much for your help and concern with the algae and the problems that we're having in the lake, and we really appreciate your involvement with it. So thank you. Thank you very much. I have one other small thing. A young man wrote a letter, and it may not be important, but it's important to me that his voice is heard. And his name is Oliver Wakeman, and he is a Kenmore resident. He says, "My name is Oliver. I'm in 3rd grade, and I want to talk to you about large cups of soda." And he says, have you ever seen someone drinking a lot of soda? The mayor of New York wants to ban large cups of soda, and I agree with it. My first reason is serious health problems, heart problems, and probably short lives. My second reason is when kids drink too much soda, it causes bad brain damage. I will vote to ban large cups of soda, and I will vote. Anyone can vote on this, and I will stand on this here ground and see people drinking less large cups of soda. Hooray for less soda, and please spread the word to other mayors in the area. So I appreciate the kids who take the time to write us, and it's an important issue to them, and their voices need to be heard too. So thank you very much. And with that, public comment will be closed. Next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Councilmember Hurd.
I just wanted to clarify. I was wondering if staff could answer Mr. Adamski's question about where the water sampling, is it limited only to Log Boom Park, or is it throughout kind of our shoreline and Lake Washington?
City Manager. Mrs. Overlease.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So, of course, Richard Sawyer, our surface water manager, said, "Do I need to be here tonight?" And I said, "No, I got it." So I know that what we're asking Council to approve is our kind of ongoing and continuing contract with King County for Log Boom Park testing. Now, unfortunately, what I can't answer is under what mechanism, if we did additional testing last year in the Arrowhead area, how Richard did that. I don't know if it was a contract amendment, if it's something the county did for us. So my recommendation would be that you approve this contract, and I can go back to Richard and ask. So I guess we have two options. You can pull it, and I can ask Richard, and we can bring it back at a later date, or we can approve this contract. I can ask Richard how that happened last time and see what he recommends. So I'm sorry I can't answer that question.
I can tell you a little bit about how it happened last time was that Richard got the money.
Mr. Adamski, if you could talk with her offline, that would be great.
Oh, sure.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, these are the type of questions we'd be happy to answer during the workday when I have my coworkers available to answer those questions.
Great. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you.
Mr. Adamski, if you wanted to come in and when they had the staff here that could back that up there, and dig out the information for you, please do.
It was a very easy process last year.
So is there is a motion in front of us. Any further comment? All those in favor of passing the consent agenda say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent agenda stands approved. Next item on the agenda is annual police report. Chief Sether.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight I'll briefly go over the crime stats with you and talk a little bit about our reporting systems, and then give you a brief update on the traffic motor officer position and what we've been doing with that so far, and then be happy to answer any questions. So about a year ago, I came and we talked about total enforcement, which we refer to as TE. It was a new reporting system that was supposed to capture, be NIBRS compliant, and it was going to take off with the county, and we're going to have that. We started at Kenmore and Shoreline, and the Communication Center and Major Crimes was the guinea pig, so to speak. We had it for 3 months, and we just decided that the county decided it was just too cumbersome. It would take, where we'd take a half-hour report, it would take over 3 hours to do in TE. It was taking officers off the street for just a terrible amount of time. The system was not intuitive at all. You had to jump all over the place. It had like 20 different tabs. You have to tab this tab to answer one question and jump over here, back and forth, back and forth. Just was terrible. So the county decided to scrap it and go with a new program that's supposed to be implemented by October this year. And that new program will be NIBRS compliant, and it's called Mark 43. And the way it was described, I think Washington, D.C. police and a few of the East Coast people are using it now. The sheriff went back and talked to them, and they really like it. They kind of gave the analogy that it's like TurboTax. You bring up a mask, you answer the questions, you click the button, it goes to the next one, and just it kind of walks you through the whole process. Very quick and easy, and it is NIBRS compliant. So the report you have tonight is kind of an incomplete report. We have 3 months of data that we couldn't gather and capture because the TE was a totally different way of capturing the data. So they just left 1/4 of the data out. They had to estimate some of it for some of the information. So it'll give you a good idea that with the 3/4 of the year of where we're at, but I just want to just forewarn you that it's not 100% accurate as far as the numbers. So with that, we can start walking through the report. Just highlight a few things. I will have to say that I am happy to report that this year, as in all past years, crime has not been rampant in the city. We've been pretty fortunate that it's been pretty steady in some areas, small increases in some areas and small declines in others. And that's what we kind of expect, is a kind of a roller coaster effect as crime comes through. It's not constant. If we have something that's constantly rising and it gets out of control, then we have a problem. So on the first page, page 10, it talks about Part 1 crimes. These are the major crimes, which is homicide, death by negligence, attempted to kill, suicides, accidental deaths, traffic fatalities, rape, robbery, assault, burglary, larceny, theft, motor vehicle theft, and arson. And you can see we compare ourselves to 3 other of the contract cities, which are pretty close to the same population as we are. And so this comparison, Part 1 crimes per 1,000, we come in at 15. We're just a little bit under what we were last year, kind of the same position we were in 2014. But one thing I like to see is that compared to the other 3 cities, we're pretty low. The other 3 cities are up there, not totally off the chart, but they're a lot higher than we are. Next page, it kind of gives you an overview of the homicide, rape, aggravated assault, and robberies. Glad to report there hasn't been a homicide this year or for the last 6 years and a few years beyond that. Rape has gone down by a few numbers, and we all know that it only takes a couple numbers to make it look like it's either gone down significantly or up. So it's within reason there. We kind of are at the same place as 2014 with rapes. Aggravated assaults have gone up from a 2 to 13. And it's just the nature of the beast. Sometimes you get one particular crime that will just kind of take off and have a few more of those happen per year. Next year it should be down. Robberies went from a 3 to a 6, which is still pretty good. 6, that's one every other month. And a robbery could be considered not, doesn't necessarily mean that you walk into a bank or a store with a gun and say, give me your money. If you take something by force or by threats of force from the person of another, that's considered to be a robbery. So that's where we kind of put that in context for you. Next page, arson, burglaries, and larcenies. Burglaries up a little bit, but I'd like to note that the larcenies is probably down. It looks like it's the lowest that we've had in 6 years. Not by much. I mean, we beat it by 1 point back in 2013, but it's by one case. But it's still down, which is encouraging, because larceny seems like that's the category that always kind of, those and burglaries are the two that kind of get out of control sometimes. So I'm happy to see that that's down. Next page shows you page 13, Part 2 crimes. There's a classification of what these are: assaults, frauds, vandalisms, prostitution, drug offenses, DUIs, disorderly conduct, drunkenness, those type of offenses. We're a little bit down from last year. We are still one of the lowest compared to the cities that we compare ourselves to. So that's encouraging. I think we're down by, looks like one number from last year, and everybody else is kind of within reason there. Then the next page just talks about DUIs and DVs. There really isn't. The DUIs, I think there has been a decrease in those, and I can't tell you that's because people have decided not to drink and drive. I'd be foolish to make that comment. I think it's just because we have the procedures for DUI now has made it a little bit more difficult for the officer to process. We're having to do more search warrants for blood, whereas implied consent in the state of Washington used to be pretty easy. And now they've changed, nationwide, they've changed the rules on that. So we're finding ourselves that we're getting more search warrants for blood, which takes an officer about 2.5 to 3 hours to get a search warrant and execute it. So we're spending a little bit more time per DUIs processing them, but because we're doing that, we're getting better conviction rate in court, because it's kind of hard to fight a search warrant and not get those results in versus a BAC. So that's one of the reasons why I think those numbers are down a little bit. DVs pretty much steady, about the same, which is not bad at all. Vehicle thefts down a little bit, which is always good. I'd like to see that down to 0, but I don't think we'll ever get there. One thing I do like to note that thefts from vehicles and attempted vehicle prowls are down, which is encouraging. And the attempted thefts from vehicles, the prowls, are down pretty significantly. So, next page: traffic complaints, collisions. Really nothing to report there. They're pretty steady. Part 1, Part 2 cases closed by arrest. This is where we're going to kind of get into the TE factor. It shows not very much, but that's because you're losing a quarter of data there. I believe that number is a little bit higher than that. And I would think you could look at the last 5 years, past 5 years, and see it's been pretty steady up around there. I don't think we've dropped as drastically as the graph shows us. I think we're up a little bit higher than that, but it's just what it is. Same thing with the adult juvenile charges and arrests. I think those numbers are not quite as accurate as they could be. Next page, 18, is your dispatch calls for service. These, again, remind you, are the unaudited. So what I do every month is I go into the system and I highlight the calls that are not dispatched for our area, and they take those off, because this is, like we all know, this is part of how the contract works. We get charged for our percentage of the dispatch calls for service, so I try to watch that very closely, make sure that we get a very accurate count on that. So it shows almost 4,000 calls. It's a little bit less than that, probably, imagine 300 or 400 less than that. I didn't tally the numbers today before I came in. Average response times, we go with priority X 1 and 2. Priority X, last couple years we're around 2.6, 2.4. We're up to 3.6, which is not really that bad. 3.5 minutes to get from the time that somebody picks up the phone to have a police officer at your door is a pretty quick response. The priority 1 went from 6.1 to 6.4, which is really nothing too drastic. And the priority 2s, looks like they went down slightly. So the response times, I feel, are really pretty good for the city. especially in, when we have to navigate through the traffic, and when you get behind somebody with lights and siren, and they just kind of look at you and like deer in the headlights, and they don't move, and you kind of have to navigate through that. Makes it difficult sometimes to get to where we're going. But I think that the staffing and the dispatch calls for service is really good. Commission officers per 1,000, we talked about that statistic, and it's not even one that's that we could use for any particular thing. And they just keep it in here because it's something we've had in the report for such a long time. You can see that dispatch calls for service, that each officer assigned averages about 316 calls for the year. So they're keeping pretty busy. That's the dispatch calls. That's not counting the on-view activity that they do. So that's separate from the stops that they see or the contacts that they make on their own. So that's kind of where I'm at with the report. The rest of the stuff is there for you to look at, and I'd be more than happy to answer questions on that before I get into the traffic officer position.
The next page, maybe the city manager would be best. Oh, sorry. Councilor Danuski.
I had a quick question on car prowls. So it's good to see them down. I know different neighborhoods, that seems to happen through a neighborhood and go to a next neighborhood. So are you using people's reports to do like extra enforcement in a certain neighborhood when that happens? How do you do that?
That's one of the reasons why I'm very avid that I approve all the reports for the city. Nobody else does. Because I want to see what's going on where. So if I see a neighborhood getting hammered with a particular type of crime, then we'll go ahead and I'll put it out to the officers, hey, we need to step up enforcement or area checks or that kind of stuff in a certain neighborhood. I have gotten calls from people who say that they think that stuff is going on in their neighborhoods. I put those out to the officers also so they can kind of monitor their free time and check those areas out.
Thank you.
So the car prowls, just real quick, it would be very helpful if we could just get people to lock their cars and to take everything out of it so they can't see the purses and the suitcases and then bags sitting on the seat. That would encourage people to break in to their cars and steal them. But yeah.
Thank you.
So cost per capita. I noticed that there was a big jump in 2011 to 12, about $12. And then there was a jump from 15 to 16, much smaller. Are we expecting a more gradual increase this next year or another jump?
Every fall we get an estimate of what the next year is going to cost, and that was within our budgeted expectations. And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe it was around a 3% increase, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so that's for 16, that was $149.15 per person in the city. So what that costs for the year. Am I reading that right? Pardon? No, I was just wondering if I was reading that correctly.
Yeah, my understanding is 2017 is going to be similar.
Okay, thank you.
Does the cost of police services, is it based on a per capita, or is it a certain amount that's computed to give you a per capita figure? So if the population was to go up, does their cost for police services automatically go up? No.
It would go down.
It would go down.
So it's based on actual costs that the sheriff has to provide services to us.
Thank you. Anything else? Thank you. Okay.
Okay. So real quick on the traffic position, we brought our part-time traffic officer in to help us with Target Zero initiatives for the enforcement. He has a certain amount of training that he has to attend, or that I make sure he attends, let's put it that way, because it's very important. Being on a motorcycle is a diminishing skill, and you can get hurt real quick if you lose your sharpness on it. So there's a training that he does, and he goes at least once a quarter to training. We try to get him on the bike as much as possible. It seems like this last couple months, the weather has not been very cooperative to get him out there. Plus, when we had a nice day, then the staffing didn't allow it. So he will be getting out there more frequently this summer. When the weather's nice, I'm going to keep him on the bike as much as I can. So since he's been here, we've logged 156 hours on the bike, and he's written 184 tickets, which is pretty good. So the number will go up in the summertime when more people are out, and he's going to be able to be on the bike more and can observe more. But he is focusing on what the council has brought to the pedestrian safety and to inattentive driving, and of course speeding is another big factor. So he enjoys doing what he does. He's having a good time, and I think it's making a little bit of a difference, because some of the areas that we've had a lot of problems with getting people to slow down, it seems like we're not having it. We're seeing a reduction in tickets in those areas.
Plus, Officer Depp has just been a great addition to our team. He's really good with the public and meets the definition of officer-friendly.
Yeah. So anytime we have somebody that comes to the City Hall with a child or with a group of kids that want to talk to an officer, I usually put him out there, because it's great for kids to see a bike and to talk to him. He's really good with people. So that's kind of my report.
Your Honor, may I jump in if there aren't any questions? I say this every year, but I'm really pleased with our contract relationship we have with the King County Sheriff's Office. I think it is working extremely well. It's cost effective, especially compared to the alternative, which would be to provide our own in-house police department. For a city our size, it makes so much sense to contract and be able to utilize the economies of scale in the Sheriff's Department. Our police officers, our chief of police, are extremely professional. I really appreciate them putting their lives on the line every day. They have such a difficult job, and I'm just so thankful for everything they do for our department. Just to lavish some kudos on our chief, I always say he leads by example, and he truly does. He's a true professional. He's a working chief. He gets out there and works the streets and does a good job and demonstrates to his fellow officers what hard work really means. So thanks, Chief, for all you do and for all your officers.
Thank you, Chief. So, need a motion to receive and file the 2016 police report.
So moved.
And I'll second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The file then is to be received and filed unanimously. Next item on the agenda is discussion and potential approval of the City of Kenmore 2017 requested priorities for King County. Ms. Owsley.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Just as we do with the state legislative agenda and federal legislative agenda that you discussed not too long ago, we prepare a list of requested priorities for our work with King County. And the last time we did this was in 2015, and I've included that 2015 version in the agenda packet. Hoping for questions, discussion, things you'd like to add or not have in the agenda, and if we need to come back at a later date for final approval, that would be just fine. Just want to call your attention to a couple of updates and additions to what we had previously. In the first section on transit service and parking, parking continues to be a big issue, particularly commuter parking that shows up throughout our downtown. One thing that we are, again, prioritizing and adding some extra language to is water taxi service. As you know, in a recent expansion study, Kenmore to the University of Washington was one of the top-rated alternative route that was studied. And we think it's more important than ever now that Lake Point is gaining momentum to make the city's support for adding this route as a demonstration route or really taking a close look at this as something that we would want to ask for your approval.
I didn't get that.
She didn't get that? Shall I repeat that?
No, please don't.
Okay. Maybe it's just a birthday trick.
No.
But that is one thing, and it came up in citizen comment tonight about the importance of adding that alternative service between Kenmore and the Sound Transit stop at the University of Washington. The transit service that was cut from particularly South Kenmore, some work has been done in the interim. Metro staff has worked with our staff and community members and people from Kirkland on some alternative transit modes to be considered to kind of fill in the gaps when those two routes were taken out of service. And they're paratransit, so I think the alternatives that have been identified for South Kenmore include a school pool, which is kind of a ride-sharing matching service for commutes to school, and then a trip pool, which is metro vans that would take people from neighborhoods to the closest transit center. So that's kind of that last mile sort of service. And then community vans, which are metro-owned vans that can be pre-scheduled, not for commuting, but for other trips, and they're driven by a volunteer driver. So those are the alternatives that were arrived at in that alternative service discussion. The other changes that I want to call your attention to from the 2015 version deal with King County property that is in Kenmore, and it obviously is a long time unincorporated urban area. King County has had a lot of facilities or property in the city. One, of course, is the former Sheriff's Office Precinct building. We're supportive of the current plan under consideration to have a temporary, long-term temporary use for Mary's Place, which is a family shelter for the precinct property. But we're also suggesting that this is a good time for King County to really take a longer view of the future for that property. And as you know, there is a shooting range on the property that has definitely some abatement issues that need to be taken care of. So we've called that out. And then there are a number of scattered properties throughout the city that remain in King County ownership. A lot of them are surface water facilities. When some of you came with us a few months ago for the Circuit 26 visit with PSE, there's a swath of King County property right up in that area where we were with PSE. So it becomes complicated with maintaining these properties, and so we're suggesting that this is a good time to take stock of that and to have King County initiate the process to transfer those properties to the city. And the final really update, call your attention to is invasive aquatic weeds and toxic algae on the last page. A plan has been submitted to Ecology, so that's been updated. That item's been updated to reflect that, but we still feel that King County has a very important role to play in bringing jurisdictions together who are all affected by not only aquatic weeds and toxic algae, but the riparian health of the Sammamish River as well. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or take any suggestions for additional issues.
So these are not ranked in any particular order.
They
These
are not
just
ranked.
our county priorities.
That's right. And again, just the way that we use the federal and state legislative agendas, it gives the officials in that other level of government an idea of what matters to Kenmore, and it doesn't limit us in any way from not bringing up other issues as they come up, but it's just kind of a good way to organize our thoughts and priorities.
Well, state and federal are one page, that normally, and that's what got me with this one was three,
Right.
was whether they are ranked in any order or not. I'm glad to see the riparian health there for the Sammamish River, because that does have problems. Questions? Councilmember Curtis?
I'm not sure quite how to address this. I have several issues. Shall I just go through all of them? And then
Absolutely.
Okay. So to me, it felt too long. It went from 9 items before up to 11, and it's not necessarily the worst thing in the world, but it just felt like it lost focus by being that long. Okay. As I said, well, how could I shrink it if I were going to? It seems like the transfer of property is almost an administrative issue, and I don't know that it needs to be a council priority to get it on the agenda. It seems like we could just ask nice and something good would happen, but I could be wrong. Same on the old King County Police property. It seems like that's going to happen. It feels like that could be administrative. I'm not sure it needs to be at this level of priority. The other, if I were going to cut, I don't know how important it is to list both the Sammamish and, let's see, this is the water. Yeah, the Kenmore Navigation Channel and the Sammamish River Recreational Channel. Are these really important to us? I guess would be a question. I know we keep them on here and we keep talking about them. If I had a choice, I think cleaning out the Sammamish River might give us more bang for the buck than the navigation channel. But again, I just throw that out for the folks to think about. And then the last one was on the water taxi. To me, this feels overstated, a little bit too strong. Where it says water taxi is essential to provide transportation choices. Since I don't believe that to be true, I think the number of people that will go on a water taxi are so minuscule, it'll be a very small percent compared to the total. So essential is, I think, way too strong of a word for what I believe will happen. And the water taxi service is even stronger now. I understand that with the process of elimination, the numbers are getting smaller. But if I were going to redo this paragraph, I would stop it at about the second sentence there. As a regional commuter hub and strategic north end location, Kenmore should be an ideal location launch point for a passenger-only ferry, period. And I would delete the last 2 sentences.
Could you tell him the numbers, please? The projected numbers on ridership?
I don't have those in my head.
Okay. I believe it was 56,000 by 2020 if it started, and I think 2025 it was well over 100,000 ridership. So those are pretty for the ferry.
For what, year?
Per year. Yeah, so those are, I've been working on that one for a long time.
It had the best fare box revenue return, too, that route.
Yeah.
Of any.
The return on dollar investment is really good on that route. So,
Okay. Thank you. Oh, Dr. Curtis, just one response to the navigation channel. King County is the local sponsor for that, so they continue to play a role in it. So that's one reason to.
Is it an actual role or a non-role?
It's an official role.
I understand that. But if they don't intend to ever do anything, is there a reason to leave it on this list? I guess is really the essence of the question.
Councilmember Sperry, then Councilmember Smith.
So a couple things. I guess the first thing was I was surprised at how many things that we have to work with King County on. It was just to see the long list. The second one is more of an aside, but I was thinking about the property transfers in the, I know that a lot of the parks that we have used to be King County parks and all that. But I remember that there are these little bits of land that are right on like the slough and things like that. So it might be kind of fun when you're going through to identify things that were King County or right away. We may find that we have a little more waterfront access than we thought. So I would definitely look at that.
Yeah, we do have an inventory, somewhere 20 plus different properties.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes, I'd just like to mention also on the property transfers with regards to the sheriff's office, I think it seems like since there is an abatement issue and there are some serious questions on cost and everything, I do think that's an important thing to keep in there, just so it's also clear that we don't want to be footing that bill on any of that, and it should come from the county on their clear direction and plan.
Councilmember Herbig.
I actually think it's important that we keep the property transfer on here, because I think that one of the ways you're going to get this done is by having Councilmember Dembowski aware of it. And this is a document that that will get his attention more than others, and he's pretty effective at working within that bureaucracy. He is. And if there's something that would make our lives easier, then I think that's an important thing to keep in there. Water taxi, again, I just want to reiterate, I'm supportive so long as we don't actually have to spend money on it. If it's King County money, great. But I don't want us spending money on that in particular. And those are my only comments. Thank you.
Well, indirectly, you are spending money on it. Yeah, if you could get this electronic along with those properties, because, I talk with Diane Carlson all the time. I talk with the county exec, and certainly I talk with Dembowski quite frequently. So it would be great to have these, so I have something that when I see them, I can continue to bug them about.
Does the list?
Yeah,
do you have
whatever.
any comments on the list?
Yeah, yes. Okay. Something. So at least if they ask me, I can say this, and please talk to this person. Deputy Mayor, anything else? Councilmember Curtis.
So I had a question on the property transfers. I know between our subdivision and the subdivision to the south, there's 18 inches of no man's land that isn't part of either subdivision. My understanding, it's part of King County, owns the no man's land that didn't get deeded anywhere. Does your list include that sort of thing? All these little stripes and bits that King County owns?
I will definitely check on that, but there are small properties on that list, I can tell you.
Because I think I've heard in Spokane, they just took all those little bits and sold it to the people next to them for minimal, just so they didn't have to deal with risk and liability and owning all these bits that lay all over the place. Cleanup, I think, might be important.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else? Thank you very much. Let me see here. So let me get back to this. Come on.
The other way to compress this is to a one page is just make the font smaller.
So Chair will entertain a motion to approve this agenda.
So moved.
And I'll second. All those in favor of approving this county agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The county agenda stands approved as written.
Mayor, can you tell me who made that motion? Oh, thank you.
Sorry, my button was down.
That's okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda then is resolution number 17-293, discussion of proposed revisions to council rules and procedures. City Attorney.
Your Honor, if I can just jump in really quick. So last year you asked us to come back with a council conflict of interest policy to be added to your procedures. We brought a draft to you in November. Based on that discussion, we've made some additional changes, and our city attorney, Rod Casaguma, and our temporary management analyst, Janet Quinn, have made some revisions and want to talk to you about a couple of options they'd like you to look at here. In addition, there's also some housekeeping changes to your rules and procedures as well. So, Rod and Janet, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Carlinzi, Mayor and council members. As Mr. Carlinzi said, we staff brought to you in November, at your request, proposed revisions to your rules and procedures. One of the topics in those revisions was an area that I'll call ethics and conflicts of interest. And within that topic, there was one section regarding what we call the gift rule, the gift prohibition rule. That was an interpretation and application of the state statute that's involved, which is RCW 42230702. During our presentation to you at that meeting, some questions were raised regarding that section of the proposed revisions. And so we told you that we would study that and come back to you at another time, which is tonight. Let me start by just reading to you from that statute because my comments relate to the statute itself. It says, and that's 42230702, no municipal officer may directly or indirectly give or receive or agree to receive any compensation, gift, reward, or gratuity from a source except the employing municipality for a matter connected with or related to the officer's services as such officer unless otherwise provided for by law. What you have tonight with this agenda packet is two versions of draft revisions to the council rules and procedures. They're the same except for the gift rule. Concerning the gift rule, we are proposing to you for your consideration two options. The first would merely be a quotation from the statute I just read, replacing municipal offer with council member and replacing municipality with city. If we just quote that statute in your rules, then you would be required to interpret that statute and apply it to any gifts that you might receive or gifts that you might want to give in connection with your responsibilities, which is primarily interpreting that phrase for a matter connected with or related to the officer's services. The other option we're presenting to you is a section that we have taken in part from the gift rule promulgated by Bothell, Kirkland, Bellevue, and in a small part, Linwood. This other option is an interpretation and application of the statute. It is a rewording of the statute with the intent that it is much easier to apply these other words than the statute itself. This other option contains a long list, which you might have seen already, of items that are presumed not to be prohibited gifts. And those items will give you an indication of what presumptively is not prohibited by the statute, and you might find it very helpful. I want to point out, though, that those items are merely a presumption, and the way we have crafted the words for you, the presumption can be overturned or overcome with rebuttable evidence if someone believes or other council members believe that the decision you made as to whether something is within that category and therefore not supposed to be prohibited is wrong. We are looking for you today to give us direction concerning these two options I just mentioned, and also we're requesting your comments on the other revisions that are in these draft rules that are before you tonight. And Janet and I are certainly available for any questions you have, and as Mr. Carlinzi said, I can probably better address the gift rule prohibition because I'm sure if you ask questions about it, they'll probably be of a legal nature.
Questions? Councilmember Curtis.
Is this the same state law that applies to physicians taking gifts from drug companies? Or is this a new state law special for us in council and policy setting bodies?
And Councilmember Curtis, I'm assuming you're asking about the statute I read to you?
Yes.
This only applies to municipal officers. Does not apply to state officers and employees. They have a separate law, which was raised last time and which we wanted to consider in connection with our options that we've given you.
The reason I asked is ours has the $50 limit, and per event or per lunch or whatever, and it seems like it's been pretty easy. They know they're not supposed to give us too much money, and we know we're not supposed to take too much money, and it's been pretty easy to manage. So if it sounds like one of the options would be a very similar sort of interpretation. Personally, I guess I'm a little puzzled by that interpretation. To me, when I read it just plain old English, it seems pretty clear. It just says, don't take anything. So the more liberal, expanded interpretation, I don't actually see how we can get there from the words that are written. So I'm missing something.
You are not missing anything. Very good comment. The $50 exemption you talk about is in the state law. I wasn't aware that it applied specifically to physicians, but if those physicians you're talking about are covered by the state statute for state officers and employees, then that $50 exemption would apply. There is a $50 exemption that the other cities I mentioned have incorporated into their gift rule. We have reviewed that $50 exemption thoroughly and have concluded there are a number of issues that are raised by that, including, among others, that it's not clear in those code provisions what is actually within the $50 exemption. And also why the $50 exemption applies to certain things and not to others. So our recommendation is that the $50 exemption not be approved by you, but if you would like us to look further at that $50 exemption, that's one of the comments we'd like to hear from you tonight.
Mayor Baker, can I speak to that?
Yes, please.
I know that in the F1 supplemental form that that the PDC requires you to fill out, that there's a $50 threshold for reporting, and that applies to state officers, to council members, to school board members, to everybody that is an official. And I talked to the PDC because they have referenced in the F1 supplemental is the the Washington Administrative Code 390-20-020A, which is designed for lobbyists, but in application is the form that you go to from your F1 supplemental. So my conversation with the PDC was, by implication, that means it applies to everyone, and the answer was yes. So there are guidelines in this that are provide a good baseline from my perspective. I am not an attorney, and I'm not offering any legal advice. But logically, there's some structure that gives you some guidance there in the WAC 390. Does that help at all, or does that further confuse the issue? And on your F1 supplemental, you're required to report anything that is in excess of $50 per occasion. So I think that would be my guess where the $50 threshold comes in from other jurisdictions.
All right. I think I still don't understand the liberal interpretation that lets us do anything, take anything. It just seems like the words, when you just read them, like third grade English, it seems like don't take anything. So there's something I'm missing, how you get to the liberal interpretation.
Are you
Yes. City Attorney.
You're right. The conservative interpretation of the statute that I read is that it does say you cannot accept, directly or indirectly, anything that is a gift, reward, gratuity, or compensation, unless it's your pay, salary for being council members, is really what it's saying. The conservative interpretation is that you look at those words I just mentioned alone, and it says nothing, whether it's 1 penny or more, nothing. The liberal interpretation would take into account the phrase I mentioned, for a matter connected with or related to the officer's services. So if one can argue with respect to a gift that a council member received that is being given not for a matter connected with your services, then one could argue that if it's not connected with the services, then it can be received even though it's more than 1 penny. Does that make sense? That's how you would get to a liberal interpretation. However, a liberal interpretation has never been approved by a court. So what I'd like you to understand is if you wanted to take a liberal interpretation and say, well, a $50 limit is okay as long as one cannot show that it is for a matter related to your services, then it's okay. There's risk there, which is why you've probably heard from others who've talked about this that many city councils just go with the state statute. And the safe view is that council members should not take any gift from anybody because arguably that is in violation of the statute. However, as I said, the other cities have interpreted this statute in a way that would allow the $50 exemption to apply in the list that we talked about to be implemented on the ground that when you consider that phrase for a matter connected with, that's what all of those topics relate to. Is this totally confusing? Yes. That's the way I understand you could justify it.
So taking that conservative approach, today I went to North Bend and met with the mayor and city manager, and they bought me lunch. Now that's a gift. Is that permitted? It has nothing to do with my being a council member here. It's because I'm president of Sound Cities Association.
And that luncheon, was that a Sound City meeting?
Pardon?
Was that a Sound Cities meeting?
It was a meeting that I had as president along with the executive director with the mayor and city administrator in North Bend.
I would say that this is a difficulty with the statute, that what you have to look at is the circumstances surrounding that luncheon. The question would be, is the mayor attempting to gain your vote on an action related to Kenmore business by buying you lunch? That's really what the statute is intended to prohibit.
Yeah, no, this is Sound Cities business, has nothing to do with the city of Kenmore.
So I think there's a very good argument that it's not for a matter connected with your services because this person is not trying to buy your vote or gain influence in Kenmore matters because of that lunch. The difficulty everybody has with the statute is that it seems to be contradicting itself, quite frankly, in the first part and second part. The first part says you can't take anything from anybody. The second part is emphasizing that it has to be for a matter connected with your services, which most people interpret as someone trying to buy your influence, to buy your vote, which is how the other code provisions are actually worded.
Okay. Gordon Thomas Honeywell, our lobbyist. Alan and I, and I think
Lori?
Lori, for the AWC annual meeting.
Oh, okay.
They provide dinner one night.
Okay.
We can no longer do that.
At an AWC conference?
Pardon?
At an AWC
Yes.
conference? Yes, one could argue under this that because that contract between the city and the firm is approved by the city council, that dinner is a matter connected with your services, one could argue. And therefore it's prohibited.
Therefore what?
It's prohibited.
Okay. Now, the state has that same rule for their legislators elected, and I think, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if they sit down, it's counted against them. If they stand up, it's not.
Is that right?
Kind of. And they're allowed 12 a year.
Yeah, okay.
Has to do with whether they're getting buffet style or served. And
Exactly.
This sort of thing.
So, all right, and then there's other instances, National League of Cities, where different sponsors are putting on dinners or events that don't do any business out here, that we're not involved with at all. So are we allowed to go to those?
These are not part of these are not the dinners that the city
No,
pays
they're
for as part of the
usually
conference?
separate events in the evening that different companies have put on. But these companies are not out on the West Coast quite often.
But
That
using
the
this-
host cities
Correct.
get these people
I
in, like
understand.
we did when they were here.
And using the analysis I just did for the other question you had about the firm providing legislative services, I think one could argue that if those companies and those businesses do not do business out here, and there's a slim, if totally remote possibility that they would be seeking to do services for the city, then I would argue that that is not prohibited under this statute.
And I certainly understand if they were looking to do business with us,
Correct.
right? Okay. This is still very murky.
Yeah.
And that's one of the difficulties with this
Very
statute, which is
very
why many
difficult.
interpret it very conservatively, because it does not give clear direction, and we don't have any case law to tell us how to apply
Right.
it in certain circumstances.
One example of what David is talking about is there was a reception at the National League of Cities meeting presented by the Service Line Insurance Company, where they insure the water and sewer lines coming in and out of the houses, and that's recently been approved in the state of Washington, and they want to get Kenmore to sign on for it. We were invited to it. I didn't go to it.
Neither did I.
But that was something that they have the opportunity to do business with Kenmore residents if we pass positive judgment on their program in the city. And they invited us to a reception at the national meeting.
I see.
Now,
See, that
according
would
to
fall in the
strict,
category
Neither
of
one of
being
us have.
suspect. Yeah, and the way that many officials would handle that is if you feel it's good to go to get the information, then the official would just pay for that, the meal or the cost.
and at every one of the National League of Cities meetings, there's a reception by the Association of Washington Cities.
Right.
And it's a heavy hors d'oeuvres, buffet line, and free drinks. I don't know, at least soft drinks.
See, this gets really murky. It's like we go to these meetings, we can't do anything because it potentially involves.
Right. That's why you have to use your good judgment to apply the statute, which is why many municipal offices, what they all have to do. And this discussion is good because I think just by talking about this, you can see that there are some principles and theories that you can definitely apply to determine whether this is being violated or not, one of which is, obviously, whether whoever is hosting the reception or paying for the dinner or the meals is going to possibly be doing business with the city of Kenmore, over which you have some
Yeah, that
control
one's
or some
pretty clear.
discretion.
That one's pretty clear.
So if the AWC is putting on a reception, and that reception is arguably covered by your cost of registration, which the city pays for, I would argue that is not a violation of this statute.
Okay.
probably paid for by our dues to AWC.
That's right.
Not the National League of Cities meeting.
Okay. But National League of Cities falls, in my opinion, in the same category as AWC. If the city is paying for your trip to the National League of Cities conference, all of those meals and receptions are covered, and that should not invoke the statute.
Another more basic question. In section B, number 13, at the end of it, it says that campaign contributions are, let me read it, shall prohibit campaign contributions which are solicited or received and reported in accordance with applicable law. Now, the intent of this gift thing is to discourage or prohibit people buying votes of people on the council, right? Influencing, undue influence on city decisions by giving things to council members.
All right.
Now, how does that differ from a campaign contribution?
It differs because campaign contributions are specifically authorized by law if they're reported properly, as you know.
But the purpose is the same.
One could argue that, but
yeah.
But both
we could argue it both ways. Either we like the way he's treating us and helping us with our business, therefore we're going to help him with his campaign.
Well, there's a
or
okay.
I want this. Can you get this for me? And if so, I can contribute to your campaign.
I think the difference is that in the campaign situation, the money's going to the campaign, which can only be used to help the person get elected, whereas in the other scenario, it's going to the council member personally and benefiting them personally. So it's how the money's being used, or the gift is being used.
But also, I could say that these are two separate state statutes. Both of them were passed by the legislature, and we need to give effect to both of them the best we can.
But what I'm saying is the motivation for somebody to give money in a campaign versus give money as a gift.
Right.
Yeah, the
could
motivation.
be the same.
Yeah, it could be the same.
One could argue they're the same, yes.
Yep.
In the end.
Yeah. And I don't know of anybody at this dais here that haven't put some of their own money into their campaigns. Now, if a gift, a dollar gift, helps us add more money to our own campaign, I don't know, just the conflicts there are interesting.
I'll come back. Councilmember Smith, Councilmember Sperry, Councilmember Danusa.
I generally am in favor with the first one. That's just pretty simple, and it's this consistent with the state statute. But I would say the only thing that concerns me at all are those little tiny things that you don't even think about. Like, and what got me thinking about it is I'm looking at this flyer from the admins, and they do a Snow King picnic or something, and it's it's eating a brownie and having a glass of lemonade you're invited, I assume, because you're interested in it, but also because you're on the council. And it's those little incidental things that are the things that concern me. Unfortunately, I don't get to go to all of these fancy dinners, but I do drink lemonade and eat brownies and have a beer every once in a while. And so those are the things.
Had some nice muffins and that here at this thing on Saturday.
But those are the things that it's where you don't even know, you're not even thinking of it as a gift or anything. You're just going to something, and maybe you come home with a magnet on for your fridge that says, don't, flush oil down the toilet or something. And is that a gift? That's the kind of stuff that I just want to make sure we're okay with those basic things.
In answer to your question, or a comment, I guess it is, you've highlighted two lines of thinking of this statute and prohibition. One is that it should be interpreted literally and conservatively to mean that those items you talked about, the sticker on the refrigerator, the cup of coffee, the one donut that someone buys for you that maybe is worth 50 cents, was not intended by the legislature to be prohibited. It follows what people would say is the intent of the statute, which is to prohibit gifts that would actually cause you to vote differently from the dais. Penses it does not have that exemption, and therefore every gift, no matter whether it has, whether it's a penny, whether it's a penny or more, is prohibited. Those two lines of thinking are even mentioned on the Municipal Research Services website if you've taken a look at it, but I did. And the staff at MRSC has pointed out that those are the two lines of thinking that municipal officials tend to follow. And I am telling you that if you follow the liberal view, which is you can take a cup of coffee or you can have someone buy you a $7 lunch, that there's some risk in doing that. Because again, the statute under one reading prohibits anything that is a gift as long as it looks like it's trying to buy your vote, so to speak.
Councilmember Sperry and then Councilmember Danuski.
The city manager was wanting to jump in on
Oh, that's okay. I can wait. Thank you, though.
Yes.
Well, thank you. We make your job interesting, don't we? So when I looked at the two versions, so version A is, I believe what you've been describing was just literally the statute. And then version B, on page 14, you list, kind of bring some exceptions or examples, I guess, of what would not be a prohibited gift, if you will. And to me, when I was thinking about this, the purpose of this, reworking this and adding this section is to bring some clarity to the situation, just so we have something, for somebody that maybe is new or just for us to review of what, clarity as much as there can be. I guess I can see your face, clear as mud, right?
Well, I was thinking of the word guidance. It's some guidance.
Guidance, okay. I like that, yeah.
To look at these items and to ask yourself whether, one, this item falls within one of these categories, and two, whether the presumption that that item has of not being prohibited makes sense.
I see. Well, to me, the problem with the first one is it could be interpreted so literal that just as Councilmember Smith said, you drink the lemonade and eat the brownie, and, assuming it's a regular brownie and all that. But, it could, somebody could really make a big deal about nothing is what I'm trying to say. So I prefer we're having the guidance that's provided in the section B, where it just kind of gives you some examples. One of the things that I've found really helpful over the years is that if there's ever a question, for example, when we were first working on that, the development across the street, and I think it was the first developer that there was some kind of a reception they wanted us to come to, and then we checked with you, and you said that would be fine, but you have to pay for your food, and I don't think anybody went. So that's what I've found, is that if there's a question or if it's iffy, we just run it by you, and you help us to see whether it's something we should proceed with or not. So,
well, you've pointed out the reasons to go for alternative 2, and Councilmember Smith has pointed out reasons to go with option 1, which is why we're asking for your input, because they're very, both positions are appropriate and usable. And on option 2, because it is modeled somewhat after the 4 cities I mentioned, obviously, if you pick option 2, you have company.
Well, it's pretty similar to the state legislature one. I actually looked up their ethics just to be sure, and it's very, very similar to that.
That's where this list comes from.
Yeah, I read that the other night. So,
but as we pointed out, the difficulty we all have for cities and counties is that the state statute on gifts for state officers' employees is different, and it specifically has the $50 exemption. Which then shows a legislative intent that the de minimis situations that have been talked about should not be prohibited.
Thank you.
Wait, do you mean to tell me that the state legislature has different rules for itself than it does for local governments?
No.
What a shock. Huh. Interesting.
First time you've ever heard that.
Yeah.
Councilmember Danuski.
So I had a question on something Janet was saying. So if the first one, the statute is interpreted conservatively and you can't take anything, why would there be anything on the F1 that would even allow you to report?
See, that's my, okay, now you're getting the non-attorney perspective, but that's my thought as well, that the presence of that and the reference to the WAC 390, which is the lobbying reporting guide, implies that there's an expectation that that is a reality that you live with, and that this guide is framework to help you make decisions about what's appropriate and what isn't appropriate.
Yeah, I think I lean a little bit towards option B, just because we're trying to do the right thing here, and this is guidance that will help you do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you go with option A, I'm not sure you know if you're doing the right thing at all. So I'm just leaning a slight bit towards option B, although hesitating as well.
Councilmember Herbig.
So before we get to the A-B question, I want to thank you for the language around conflict of interest. I think that was part of the reason why I brought this forward at a retreat. What was that, a year and a half ago? Was because of the conflicts that we saw with the mayor of Bothell and what was going on at the Wayne Golf Course. So I appreciate the clarification being put in there about conflicts of interest at the council. I think that's important. I have to say, this A-B question is really, it's fascinating, it's vexing, because there's how we would operate in the perfect world and how you operate in the real world, and how you navigate this as a human being and not a robot going through life. And that I think is kind of the difficult part here. So I'm still torn on that, and I'm still thinking about that. Yeah, I thought that this list of exemptions looked awfully familiar after what I had read when I was starting to work at the Ledge. So that makes a lot of sense. But I'm still thinking about it. But I appreciate the work on the conflict of interest.
Councilmember Curtis.
After hearing the discussion, I think the chance of actually abiding by the rule that we won't take anything is zero. So why pick a choice that we know we're going to be a failure at? So I'd be inclined to go with the B with some structure to it and kind of the purpose and intent, and we don't want to be influenced, and yet we go to places and there's food there, and so it makes sense to have some leeway there.
I guess we are implementing this policy, and other councils will follow us, and other councils will be involved and go to meetings, and there should be a little bit of clarity here, and just can't have anything. Nigel's point there with conflicts of interest, I think, is very well taken, especially what's happened around here. But it gets really murky when you go to different functions or being part of different committees. It just gets really difficult to understand. So
that's a very good comment, and I've been dealing with this statute personally on behalf of my clients for a couple of decades. And all of your comments are very intelligent comments and very smart comments. And we have tried our best to present to you the options here, but Mayor, your comments are the reason why you have option B. And option B has been adopted by some of our neighbors.
See, there's a North End Mayor's meeting that happens once a month, where the mayors of Snohomish, Lake Forest Park, Bothell, Woodinville, Redmond, Duval, Sammamish, Kirkland get together, and we all discuss what is going on in our cities, right? So we all have an idea of what big projects are coming down the pike for them, how it's going to affect us, and how we can perhaps work with them or piggyback off some of their stuff. Well, the host city pays for the lunch, and that's because it moves from city to city to city. So that gets to be murky the way you said it in the first option there, and just nothing.
Right. However, if let's say there's 4 cities that meet periodically, and the hosting is switched around, I don't see any problem with that.
There's not a problem there.
I don't see any problem with that. However, if let's say the host city has been hosting 3 times in a row, and that host city wants another city or two to sign an interlocal agreement on something, as you can imagine, that looks bad. So you have to
It's a
use your very good
municipality and a
judgment on the
municipality.
statute. I'm
But
sorry?
it's a municipality and a municipality. It's not a municipality and a corporation or an individual.
The difficulty with the statute, however, is that it doesn't distinguish between private gift giving and gift giving by state officials, local officials, or other government
Now, you see, on the feds, it does make a big difference. An individual can't give a gift to a congressional office, but a municipality can. So
I know where
it
there's
just,
a
it
federal
just
law
gets
on that.
really complicated.
Yeah. So anyway, are you? Mayor, do you have a sense for what council's thinking?
City manager.
Well, one thing I want to point out is option B is tighter and less liberal than Bothel's policy, correct?
Yes. We have taken many of those listed items and made them more clear so that they're, I think, more clear meaning the presumption is a better presumption in many of these items than Bothel's listed items. Some of those Bothell listed items, in my opinion, could be subject to abuse. So we have taken some of those and made them more difficult to apply to what probably is a prohibition.
You could even make it even a little less liberal. I don't know if I like this idea, but I'm going to throw it out. One idea is, if let's say you're invited to a Kenmore Heritage Society function, and at that function they recognize you for how supportive you've been, and they give you a bouquet of flowers. Well, that's kind of awkward for you to not take those flowers, but could you have something in your policy that says if you ever get a gift like that, let's turn it over to the city?
Well, kind of related to that, actually. The Kenmore flag people came here just a couple months ago and gave at least me and maybe Councilmember Danuski a little gift bag with information about the flag of the city, and I think it had a book about the history of Kenmore and things like that. That would probably be disallowed if we used option A, or we'd have to do something else with it. And I don't think there was any nefarious intent on their part. And I don't think we were voting on any use of the flag or anything like that. But that could be interpreted that way.
Yeah, I'm just suggesting if you get a gift that you can turn over to the city, then do it. If you get a book or a bouquet of flowers or something. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out as an idea.
And you'd end up with 7 copies of a certain book.
Yeah, and then we could put them out in the lobby and...
Now, one of the items, Councilmember Herbig, the situation you mentioned would be a presumed okay gift. Because it's unsolicited, it's more of a token than anything else, and that's under this list. And I would find it very difficult for anyone to argue that that presumption has been rebutted.
Right, I was just saying under option A, that would be read that way probably.
Yeah. And actually, I was looking at option C also.
C? I think he means version A. Did you mean in version A if we...
Yeah, sorry, yes. I was saying under version A.
Oh, in
it might
version
be.
A, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, Councilmember Curtis?
So I'm done with that topic.
Good.
But I have a bunch of other questions, and I think some of them will easily be answered. It's the details, the markup.
Okay.
So the first one is Section 2, and then subsection F under that, council member initiatives, and it just says deleted. But I can't tell what was deleted. Is the whole section being deleted? Is the capital word initiatives being deleted? There's nothing after. A lot of places it'll say...
I know, and so I apologize for that. The challenge for me, just practically speaking, was that you had the vacancy and leave of absence policy. That was a separately approved policy. So I tried to fold it into this policy. convert them from PDFs to Word and then make it all work together. It didn't do it correctly, but I wanted it to be a clean copy for you to read. So I ended up going through and deleting a lot of the extra quotation marks that were in a different font, apparently, in the other one. And nothing material was changed unless it says in there that it was changed.
Got it. Because someone clearly deleted a certain word and then it told what the new word was. And it might be add an S or add the apostrophe in the right place.
That was just formatting to help it be more readable.
So then let's look under Section 5. So you've answered most of my questions with that simple. The easiest is you just delete all formatting and you start over. Then you get what you want.
We wanted you to see the changes, so that was...
Okay, let's see. Section 5E.
This is highly personal to Councilmember Curtis because he worked many, many hours on this.
The fact that you didn't blow up the whole thing and start over, I'm actually pretty pleased. These are relatively small changes, I would say. Actually, it's, let's see, prohibited conduct. It's the same thing. It's one of those deleted that I couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
So there's some kind of marking that you, okay. You just answered all those questions?
Okay.
Okay, so I've got a couple.
Okay.
So if you take a look at our agenda tonight, the way you have it here is not correct. You've got a call to order.
What?
And then you've got citizen comments.
Where are you?
I am on page 93 of 115, or Section 2.
Section 2. Okay.
Order of business meetings.
Okay.
Number A is call to order. We do that. Number B is citizen comments. No. C is agenda approval. No, they're backwards. We approve the agenda, and then we do citizen comments.
So this was from your current policy?
Right, but it's just not the way
it isn't the way you do it. So we're going to change agenda approval to B and the other one to C.
Yeah, just take a look at the agenda and just make it like our current agenda.
Okay.
And then E and F, council members' reports, comments, and F, council member initiatives. We don't go around twice. I mean, it's sort of all one. It's reports, comments, and initiatives.
Which section? Tell me again.
Same one. This is section 2.
Oh, under E and F
E and F,
there.
yeah.
Okay.
Just E and F gets combined.
Okay, so like tonight's agenda shows them separate.
Yeah, and it really shouldn't. Because we don't go around twice after comments. We do it all at once.
So I want to make sure I understand you. You're saying that E and F are combined, and that should just be one section?
So it should read E, council member reports, comments, and initiatives. I know, that's what I'm saying. So we don't do it that way.
In practice, you treat it as just one item.
In practice, it's just one.
But all of the subpoints are in, need
Pardon?
to stay in? All of the subpoints in all of them are in?
Yeah, you certainly can
Okay.
leave the subpoints there.
Reports, comments, and initiatives.
Yep. And if they do initiatives, those things apply.
Okay.
All right, then, under citizen comments.
Same section?
3B.
Okay.
So we have changed it, state their name and city of residence. But, Councilmember Curtis, we used to do thank yous. And the addresses certainly come in handy if we want to do a thank you. If we don't require the address, we have no way of contacting the person who made the so we are going to require it on the sign-up sheet.
I think this is a good discussion to have because we are asking for it here,
But when
Yes.
they get to the podium, they don't need to state this.
And that's fine, as long
If
as
you're
they
okay
fill
with
it out and we have a way of contacting them for follow-up or whatever, then that's good.
I think this still works, but
As long as they fill it out, that's great.
Would you like me to revise A to say members of the public must fill out and sign the log prior to the
No, I
citizen
think
comment
they
period?
have to sign in prior, but then we also allow them to go afterwards and sign in if they haven't.
Okay.
But as long as the address part is on the sign-in, I think it's fine. Councilmember Curtis?
Is that record public? Because I think the concern is some people, for a variety of reasons, don't want their address to be findable, searchable in any way whatsoever.
It's public if they do a specific records request.
But how about if they're just signing in? Is that if somebody says, I want a list of everybody who spoke that night and their addresses, that's a public record?
Yes.
Yes.
So the concern I had heard was when people come to the podium, they state their address, and somebody's
Right.
watching it live, it may indicate that they're not home, and the address is now out there, and so that was the concern that I heard, but. Yeah.
I just would hate to give up the ability of contacting them if there was some follow-up that needed to be done. Or
Can I
whatever.
comment on that?
Yeah, please.
So, I mean, the sign-up sheet asks for their address, and if they leave their address, then we can follow. But, I mean, I would say if they sign up and they don't put an address, then, then don't expect to hear from us via mail. I mean, it's just, to me, I think it's just that simple.
Okay.
Yeah, make it optional.
We can leave it on the sheet, and that'll be the end of it. Okay.
Is the email on the sheet? They could leave an email.
Yeah, right now it's just address and phone number.
And you start adding email, and there it gets pretty crowded, and they can't fit all that.
We could certainly do phone number and email.
Pardon?
Phone number and email. It's up to you.
I would just hate to lose the ability of writing them a letter, a thank you note like we have in the past. Councilmember Curtis?
So the other, number 5, says the citizen comment period will be a maximum of 30 minutes unless approved by a majority council members present. We don't actually enforce that.
We don't.
It doesn't usually go over 30 minutes. So either we need to start enforcing it or change our rules. So one, I don't know that I care, but instead of saying it'll require a majority vote of the council members, if we're going to suspend and put it at the end, I mean, I'm okay with how it's written, but if we want to do it, we should do it.
See, I don't know. When people show up to talk, I really don't want to listen to part of them and then have the rest hang around. It feels like we're not listening to them. I would just rather let them speak and get finished and then move on with the rest of the business. So I'm fine if that 30 minutes goes away.
What do you think of keeping the 30 minutes and say we just ask the council if they want to extend it? It's just a matter of remembering to do that.
Yeah,
Because we're going to probably do it, unless there's still another 50 people.
We have a bunch of people here. It's an issue that's really important to them, and I would just as soon hear from them.
Right. And so on that, I mean, why would we want to include it at the end of the meeting then? Wouldn't we want to just hear it out?
So that's what I think.
Yeah.
So I just would be for taking
Delete
it
it.
out.
I'm okay with deleting it, but we should be consistent with our rules.
Right.
I'm happy to just delete it.
Delete it? Yeah.
Works for me.
Consensus is to delete that whole subsection?
Yeah, that third,
5.
Number 5.
Okay.
And renumber.
Now, I can't find it, but it seems like there was something in here about people, you're at the end, people haven't signed up, and then you ask, are there more people who want to speak? And I don't remember, I don't see it discussed one way or another. Shall we just leave it vague and not?
Yeah, I just think, like tonight I didn't, right? But usually it's when there's a lot of people here, and that's when I ask to make sure that everybody's been heard.
And I'm okay, if you don't state it, then you've got that latitude to go either way, and it really doesn't matter.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy leaving that the way it is. Since you wrote these, anything else?
No, like I say, I'm actually pretty pleased we didn't blow it up and start over. Just adding a couple sections is pretty amazing that this thing has lasted. Because that was our goal when we wrote it, not to be a document that every year we have to rewrite it.
Right.
It should be something, because before we did that, we'd keep pasting pieces on the end, amendments. So this has survived, what, 4 years, 5 years? I can't remember when we did this.
Yeah, but now that you've had that time, right, you haven't looked at it in a few years, and now we had to look at it again.
Yeah, no, there's a few things that were appropriate to change, so
Okay.
I was pretty happy with the basic two major additions that we're adding.
We there?
You tell me? Yeah.
So in citizen comments,
We didn't yet. We need to.
oh, never mind.
Okay. So I think the big issue here is 1 or 2.
A or B, you mean?
A or B?
B.
Yeah, let's just do that.
Do you want a roll call for the version A or version B?
Yes. So let's do it. Let's just do this as a formal motion.
I move we accept version B.
Council rules and procedures, right? Is that what we're doing?
I'll second that.
But
I want to be clear.
we're not asking for a formal vote tonight. We're going to bring this back for approval at a future meeting, but we want guidance on what version
Okay, so
to work with.
you want to prepare something, right? Either
Correct.
A or B.
Correct.
So we can then have a motion to direct them to go away and prepare a formal motion or formal
Ordinance.
ordinance.
For the resolution with gift
Resolution
option B.
With option B.
Right.
So, does somebody want to make a motion to have them go away and prepare a resolution with option B?
Does it have to be a motion, or is it just a thumbs up?
No, then,
It doesn't matter to us.
Doesn't
Just
matter.
Give us some indication, please.
what do you want to do? Thumbs up? Is that what I'm seeing and hearing?
Option B.
It's a unanimous thumbs up.
You just want us to
Make
bring,
sure you put unanimous in there.
you want us to bring it back to you on the consent agenda at a future meeting?
Do we want a consent or do we want it separate?
I recommend consent because you've discussed it thoroughly. We're just implementing your direction that you're giving us tonight.
If there's some issue, we can discuss it further, then I'm fine with consent.
I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, we're fine with consent.
So do you mind if I just clarify and make sure I
Please.
understood exactly what you said?
Please.
For under section 2, order of business meetings, I'm switching the citizen comments and the agenda approval.
Just look at the agenda for tonight and follow that.
Okay, all right,
And then combine E and F.
combine E and F. And you were okay with the other changes
Yeah.
that were in there, okay? Pretty easy. Thank you. Yeah,
You're combining 9 and 10. Well, combining 9 and 10, Roman numerals 9 and 10 on the agenda.
Yes.
Yeah.
Reports, comments, and initiatives,
yeah.
yes.
Is you all clear?
Yep.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate your work on this.
very much. All right.
Last but not least, here she comes.
Next item on the agenda, approval to pilot a micro-grant program to encourage community members to design, implement, love notes in the city. Mrs. Harris.
All right. So this is the fun stuff. Despite the fact that government often gets slapped and punished for being creative and showing initiative and taking risks, I try to encourage that in my organization. And Leslie came up with a creative, cool idea just recently. And so I'd like to bring it forward for your consideration and hopefully in time for this Monday night.
Oh, okay, so that was my question.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am here tonight to present a proposal to launch a pilot micro grant program that encourages the community members to design and implement love notes in our city. The inspiration behind this micro grant program came about as I was reflecting upon the 2015 For the Love of Kenmore workshop and brainstorming for the workshop on April 3rd. At the workshop in 2015, Kenmore businesses and individuals graciously donated money to support a $500 grant for the project that received the most votes at the workshop. There were several great ideas presented, which included the Why I Love Kenmore Summer Party, Midwinter Splash Party, artwork on the silos, food truck festival, colorful balloon walk, outdoor movies, food forests, and a whole lot more. While a few of those ideas actually came to fruition, with additional encouragement and support from the city, additional projects may have been implemented. So at the upcoming workshop, while there's no plan to award another $500 grant, we can use this opportunity to announce that the city will be launching a pilot micro grant program that encourages these type of activities. This small one-time matching grant is a great way to create and support partnerships between the city and the community groups to produce community-initiated projects. Other cities, including Shoreline, Kirkland, Newcastle, Renton, Bellevue, and others, have established similar programs. These microgrant programs have the potential to inspire creative and innovative thinking, also reach hard to reach and yet to be reached people, because they're awarded to community groups that are possibly like PTA groups or scout groups or neighborhood or community organizations that have another sense of community, its own community. Also, this microgrant tends to buy products and not staff. So you're actually seeing things being implemented, and also it encourages those that are involved to provide their own resources as well, if it's in kind or monetary. So there's a matching aspect to it, and further enhancing that partnership. And it also can bring new partners into our efforts. So this pilot program, it can be funded through our community event sponsorship budget. In the 2017-2018 budget, Council allocated $20,000 to support community organized events. The 2015-2016 budget supported events like the Kenmore Hydroplane Cup, Kenmore Air Seaplane Fly-In, the Kenmore Waterfront Activities Fair, and others that brought the community together. The recommendation is to dedicate $5,000 toward the pilot micro grant for 2017 and 2018. If approved by Council tonight, the next step would be to establish guidelines for the micro grant in anticipating of accepting applications this spring, and also establishing a city and citizen committee that would help in evaluating the application, the proposals. So, thank you.
Questions, Councilmember Sperry?
Well, thank you so much for your work on this, and this will be a fun way to see more projects and more love notes come. One question I do have, and it kind of went away. I guess they're talking over there. Would an organization have to be like a 501(c) or have any kind of a formal aspect to it in order to be eligible? Or is that kind of a to be determined?
That would be part of the policy development, but other cities, typically it does not have to be a 501(c)(3). Okay. It can be a neighborhood group or a community group that's interested in bringing the public together in some sort of form. Mm-hmm. So it typically does not, but it all determines on what we develop.
Yeah, I would hope the answer would definitely be no on that, because a cul-de-sac may want to have a block party and close off the street and do something that benefits the community. You might have a Boy Scout that wants to put in a bridge over a stream and might want to get reimbursed partially for that or something.
Yep, correct.
And that's actually a real example that happened when I was at Gig Harbor. My son built a bridge over a stream for his Eagle project, and the Park District reimbursed him for a lot of the costs, and he didn't have to form a 501(c)(3) or anything.
Perfect. One other thing is, I hope that faith-based groups will be included or not excluded from this, because we have so many churches and different groups that provide a lot of public service. For example, I always call it the Billboard Church, but they do a community meal once a month. I keep thinking I'm going to go to it and see what they do, and I know that Jenny Jensen is doing the Love Note, the Kenmore Community Market, that they're going to at least start at the parking lot in the church there. So I hope that will be an option to multiply some of those efforts.
I guess my only concern is if we take 5,000 out of the 20,000, will the 15,000 be enough for whatever projects we originally designed for that money?
Yes, it should be. The Kenmore Hydroblend Cup is actually not going to need as much money as they have in past years. They were able to get some additional financial support from sponsors. Also, our 15-16 budget, we actually didn't utilize all the funding. There was a few $1,000s left, so that should help out as well.
All right, thank you.
I applaud you. This is really a great idea. The question I have is, of the 5,000, is that's a maximum, and what size mini grants would you be thinking of? 500, or would it vary depending on the project, and the committee would make that decision?
I would probably set the max around 500. That's a pretty typical 500 to 1,000 for a smaller city, for a city of our size. But yeah, so that would be a fair amount of projects, and that would hopefully, I mean, we do support events in other ways as well through our permitting, like providing funding or support towards permitting. So some of those have lower costs as well.
Councilmember Danuski.
I love the idea. As you know, I've been trying to do the Hank the Heron rain walks.
We're going to make that happen.
Rainworks thing. But since I'm not an artist, every time I try and do the stencil, it turns out to be a slug. So something like that could help that, or maybe there's an artist in the office. That could help me. just in case. So anyway, I love it. We probably have to think about, and maybe you have, is this first come, first serve? Is there an application, like enough per quarter and then they get judged? Just how that would go, because I could see after Monday, you get a big splurge of it and then it's done for the year. So I don't know if you've thought of quarterly or how you want to do that.
I think it depends on the number of applications, because we definitely want to encourage people to apply. It would be an application process, and then the committee can decide based on maybe criteria that we develop if it is a project that we want to provide funding for, grant funding for. So maybe it's a successful program and we want to maybe add additional funding for it later, or maybe there's going to be some funding available, and we can evaluate that at a later date as well.
So in general, I love it. But is the plan to have the council then kind of approve the criteria before the committee forms and starts handing out awards, or is that something that you were going to?
I was going to take examples of other cities and frame it where it fits for our community, based on different things, and then also use the city and citizen committee to probably confirm that this is how we want to evaluate the proposals.
So would we be seeing those, the guidelines at some point?
Sure.
Yes? Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
Sure. We just wanted to get your blessing to be able to announce this is coming on Monday night at the For the Love of Kenmore event.
I think that's great. Thank you.
Yeah.
So would this affect anything that we're currently doing on small projects? For instance, the Redmond Kenmore hand-powered watercraft race, since Redmond is sponsoring, just the permit application fee, and Kenmore is sponsoring.
So there's.
Would then become more competitive for the grant?
No, I think there's other instances where the city just decides to be sponsor or co-sponsor, and so it wouldn't fall under. We wouldn't need to utilize this micro grant.
Any other questions? Thank you very much, Mrs. Harris. Do you need any action?
No, I don't think so. We're going to announce it at the For the Love of Kenmore event, and I'm not seeing any objection.
Well, actually, here it is asking for approval to pilot with a micro grant program.
It does. I move that we approve it.
I'll second that. You know, we've just sort of gotten in the habit of this. Do you want to take the roll?
I sure would. Councilmember Herbig?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Van Ness?
Yes.
Mayor Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Danuski?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Councilmember Sperry?
Yes.
Councilmember Curtis?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Harris. All right. Moving right along here. Staff report.
So, like I mentioned, For the Love of Kenmore is coming up on Monday night. Peter Kageyama is going to be here for 2 days. And we've got him set up to meet with various members of the community. He's going to meet with the Kenmore Business Alliance on Monday morning at 8:30. That Monday morning at 7:30 is Coffee with Council. I know that's your special time with the community, but what about inviting him to Coffee with Council? I don't know if that's a good idea or a bad idea, but you're welcome to bring him along if you want. Peter Kageyama to Coffee with Council that Monday. He might have a little jet lag, although it'll be 10:30 a.m. Florida time, so he might be okay. He'll get in on Sunday night. Yeah. Janet Quinn has been gracious enough to offer to pick him up from the airport and host him at her place, so thank you so much. We're also going to have him meet with some active co-creators for a kind of a lunch meeting, I think on that Monday or Tuesday. Hey, Leslie, do you remember if it's that lunch with the co-creators? Is that Monday or Tuesday? Monday, yeah. So if there are any citizen co-creators that jump out at you that you'd like to go to that, yeah, both of them are invited. But if there are any others that you think of, let me know and we'll be happy to invite them. It'll be here at City Hall noon on Monday. And then we're trying something new with Peter. We're going to have him meet with leaders of the faith community on Tuesday afternoon at 2 o'clock. So we've invited all the pastors and leaders of all the churches in Kenmore. Plus, we've reached out to the local mosque that's not in Kenmore but close to Kenmore and some other churches like that. So that should be fun. And then that Tuesday night, the 4th, he's going to meet with you and give you a debrief, and that's at 7 o'clock on April 4th. That's the only item on the agenda to speak of, other than staff report and council comments. That's all I have.
Are you getting ready to yard bomb something? Comments, reports, initiatives. Councilmember Smith.
Well, I guess first, there is a rumor that there's some old man that's got a birthday today.
It is a rumor.
Is that true?
It is a rumor.
It is true. Okay, that's what I thought.
It's unsubstantiated rumor.
So
You just substantiated.
Oh, Facebook said if it's on the internet, it must be true.
Wish him a happy birthday.
Thank you.
And a couple other things. One, there was an observation made on the discussion on council rules and procedures that we haven't revisited this in 5 years. And it wasn't lost on me that that is a wonderful thing, that if we have not visited this in about 5 years, that's a positive step in any direction. And so I'd like to note that. I'd also like to thank the city manager for his comments regarding the traffic revision calming issues that we dealt with this last week, because I know that that's not a fun situation, but I also appreciate the fact that that there's maybe things we can learn, do differently, maybe not change much, but change some. Just to have that level of flexibility, I think, is a positive thing. And I think, everything we've gone through, I think it's it's a learning experience for all of us, and it speaks to a lot of things about just setting expectations and making sure people have a good idea of what we're trying to do. And one last thing. I had a meeting today with Dr. Reed of North Shore School District and a council member from Bothell and Woodinville, and also a school board member, and it was just a simple discussion at the most basic level about the need for some kind of pool or aquatics venue of some sort, something. We don't even know what it is yet. We don't even have the most basic ideas, because it's the most primary discussion about trying to understand what the scope of what you even want to accomplish is. And so, but I want you to know that, because it's important for you as a council and as within whatever this area would be that the discussion will take place, is to just start thinking about what you think our citizens need and what our kids need, what the school district's function should be. This would be a very broad sector that would probably encompass roughly the school district, and there's many different levels of how simple or how complex you want to make something. And so there's a long ways to go, but you got to start somewhere, and it started at a really round little table in an office today. And so just please let me know if there's any feedback you have at the most fundamental level, and as we slowly move forward, I will obviously want you all to be involved, and city manager, and to understand what this could possibly be, but it's got a long ways to go.
National championship rowing team within 5 years.
It'd be nice. It would be nice to know that those rowers knew how to swim before they got in a boat.
If we get rid of the algae, we got lots of water to swim in.
That's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Sperry.
One is, I haven't said much about the National League of Cities conference yet, partly because of just taking the time to digest it, and also the timing. But two of the classes that I took, Deputy Mayor Van Ness and I both did the small business entrepreneurship, and I have all the notes and everything if people want it. Well, the takeaway from that, there were a couple of them, and I'm still kind of working out, how to summarize that. But we're doing a lot of things right, and taking care of the businesses that we have and being known as being supportive for businesses is everything. And just, it's been interesting, the different experiences I've had recently. For example, at the Plessing session for Lake Point, we had a business owner there, and I was able to say, well, we do this, and this person looked absolutely stunned at the level of support that we give businesses and trying to work with them. So that was very exciting. The second one was intersector, so in other words, collaborating amongst groups. And that was kind of interesting because one of the big aspects there was the culture, really identifying the culture and stuff. So I have some takeaways there. So my other item, besides, of course, this rumor that we're hearing about a birthday that's kind of being denied, isn't it? I don't know about that. But our library board, you've not heard me talk much about the library board either. And the library board, how do I say this? We're meeting again and most likely disbanding. And it's kind of an interesting time for the libraries, because the library boards system-wide are having a lot of difficulty in terms of, what's our purpose, what's our focus, what is it we're actually doing. And then there's also the Friends of the Library group in Kenmore, and the long-term leader of that group has retired, essentially. And so their role is more specific in terms of fundraising for the library by doing book sales. And that also has waned not only in Kenmore, but around the region. So what I'm thinking is this could be a great for the love of Kenmore project. I mean, there's got to be another way to do this. So I just wanted to make you aware that that is happening. It seems like there's a transition that needs to happen. Not sure what it looks like, and I may be asking for us to take some kind of action or something at some point. So happy non-birthday.
Councilmember Curtis.
Nothing to add.
Councilmember Herbig.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. Councilmember Danuski.
So as you guys know, we're a Let's Move city, and we've hit the gold level. And after you hit the gold level, you get to be in the All-Stars program, if you like. And so we did that, and it was just announced that we are the second city in the United States that have graduated from the All-Stars program. So I think there'll be a press release coming out about that. Oh, and there's going to be cake afterwards.
What?
Yeah. I know. The person who always like jets out to go to bed has actually brought cake for a birthday. Yeah.
Tonight, or
for a birthday.
the Let's Move.
No, for
tonight, for his
Mayor
birthday.
Baker's birthday, there will be cake.
Really?
So anybody who wants to stay for cake, right?
Well, we got to sing then. Don't we?
Well, maybe afterwards, like with the cake
okay.
or something.
Give people a chance to escape.
The birthday boy can't escape. And by the way, this is a bad one too.
I think it's a wire.
I think it's the wire.
Maybe it's the wire, but the wire's not moving.
No, it's just maybe an incomplete ground or something.
Could be. I don't know. National League of Cities meeting. David and I went to an all-day session on community redevelopment, and it was mainly aimed at municipalities that have the ability to do public-private partnerships, but we do them in a different kind of way where we work with, like we're working with the Lake Point developer. We worked with Main Street across the street here and expressed to them our desires as to what we wanted out of the project. And then it was a matter for that developer to come up with a project that fit our needs. I'm speaking of right across the street here now, our needs, but also their needs from a business and profit motive standpoint. And what this whole exercise was we put ourselves in the shoes of the developers and had a whole list of expectations from the city to redevelop this, what was a 6-square block area that had been pretty blighted, and there were a few buildings that were still remained. Some were historic buildings that we needed to keep. And the city would forward certain amount of money for parks and certain amount for this, but they wanted a return on that investment in terms of increased tax base and revenue from the area. They were expecting a certain amount of job creation in middle wage, working class jobs and higher jobs. They were asking for a certain amount of high-end condos, a certain amount of middle condos, and there was also a homeless shelter that was in the area that they wanted to keep that was needed, and also some low-income housing. And so there was a job of this committee, about 6 or 7 of us at a table, with a facilitator that was there as well from the consulting group that put the whole thing on. It was our job to put all the pieces together. We had Lego blocks for different kinds of buildings and parks and police stations and all that sort of stuff. And you had to weigh all these things. And this consultant or this facilitator had a program on his little laptop, and he was punching stuff in. And if you came up with you'd punch the go button, and it would give you a bottom line as to whether you satisfied all these needs. And it was really an interesting exercise. And this is the second time that National League of Cities has offered this, and they probably, since the response to it has been so great each time, I think they'll be doing it every time at every meeting, the November meeting and also the Washington, D.C. meeting in March. So if any of you have the opportunity to go to National League of Cities meetings, and the next one's in Charlotte in November, I'd recommend you do it. It's an all-day program, and at first it's a little hard getting started and into it, but once you get into it, it's really a neat exercise. It helps you understand what the developer's going through to try to satisfy our objectives in a development. So I thought it was really worthwhile. But the biggest thing about these National League of Cities meetings is that you run into the same bunch of people from all over the country that you've met at other meetings. And gosh, it's really interesting to compare notes. You say, hey, we got this problem with this. What do you guys have anything? Yeah, we got it too. And how are you dealing with it? And you compare notes, and that's the biggest learning experience that I've found over the years with National League of Cities, and I really urge all of you to participate in it if it's at all possible. You can break away from your day job so that you can do this once in a while at least. Nigel went to the one last November down in Austin. Was it Austin? Yeah. Pittsburgh, yeah. And you at Austin as well. Really a lot to learn, a lot to gain from these meetings, so I'd encourage you all to do it in the future.
I think, Lori, you were surprised at how much was available.
Well, I was. Obviously, it was a very compressed time because we had the lobbying, and then my husband went with me, and we had the tour of the medical facilities at Washington, D.C., so it was an interesting time. But I would definitely concur with what Deputy Mayor Van Ness said. I gained most of mine by the connections that I met, and just people from all over the country, and getting to ask about their cities. The other part I didn't mention was I actually crashed the youth delegate part of it and did a little research. They were presenting their youth issues and all that. So there's a lot. I mean, it's a lot, but I'm glad that I went. So thank you.
I think the most valuable thing is talking to people from other cities who've gone through stuff you're going through and finding out how they handle it. I mean, those are our friendships that are going to last quite a while. So, Gabby Bormeo, that was just an outstanding event. Those of you that could make it was good. And it was really neat because her grandmother's birthday was that day. And we had her sing happy birthday to her grandmother, and they had a cake and candles. I mean, it was really nice. And she was voted off the show, but you'd never know it. She said the doors that have been opened for her are just tremendous. So we're going to hear a lot more of this Kenmore girl. So that was great. Yeah, I was going to say, if you get a chance to take the urban planning, you guys really should. It's just such a great opportunity. Kelly, I made a mistake, I think. The proclamation for Evelyn is still on. So I just sent you an email with all that stuff. We did a proclamation last summer for Evelyn LeBourne, and she lives over by you guys. And she was 100. And this May 22nd, they are celebrating their 75th wedding anniversary. She robbed the cradle. The husband is much younger than she is. He's in his early 90s. So with your permission, we're going to do another little proclamation for them. And I mean, that's amazing. When she's now going to be 101 and married 75 years, you just don't run across that every day. So anyway, it's a little surprise because I got an email about, I assumed was her and passing away, but I don't think it had something to do with somebody else. So I believe Evelyn is just fine. Friday, I'm down in Olympia with breakfast at the governor's mansion, which should be quite interesting. We're going to discuss budget issues and cities and how they really need to stop taking money away from us, or at least give us another means of raising money. So, but anyway, yeah, I think that's all I have. So, thank you guys. Appreciate it. I appreciate staff and the card that you guys gave me. That means a lot. Thank you. And not often you have a birthday and got a council meeting same night. So it's a fun way to spend it for me. If there's no other business to come before us, we are adjourned.